My name is Lorraine Pierce. I'm 66. Christmas Eve in Savannah has a way of pretending everything's fine, the lights strung across the oaks, the warm air that smells faintly of salt and pine. I'd baked my late husband's pecan pie that morning, just like every year, and wrapped the gifts for my daughter's family in red paper, tied with silver string. It should have felt familiar, comforting. But as I parked outside Diana's white brick house on Whitaker Street, I caught myself sitting still, hands on the steering wheel, heart steady in a strange, waiting way. Inside, everything gleamed. Garland draped the staircase, cinnamon candles burned, and music played low from the kitchen speaker. Diana's voice floated out sharp, efficient. "Mom's here. Grant met me first, polite as always, offering to take the pie." My daughter followed, wearing a smile too quick to reach her eyes. "You made it early. That's good." I handed her the pie dish. It wouldn't be Christmas without it. The table was already set. Fine china gold-rimmed glasses, name cards carefully placed. I noticed there were 8 seats, though we were only 6. Diana, Grant, their 2 kids, his mother and me. The extra setting puzzled me, but I said nothing. I took my usual place near the end where my husband once sat when he was alive, beside the window facing the magnolia tree. Dinner began politely enough. The children talked about school plays. Grant poured the wine. Then midway through carving the roast, Diana's tone shifted. "Mom," she said lightly, "could you move down 1 seat? I'd like Grant's mother to sit there. It looks better in photos." I looked up, certain I'd misheard. "Sweetheart, this is fine. I'm comfortable here." Her smile tightened. "Please, Mom. Just move." Something in the room went still. Grant glanced at her, uneasy. His mother kept her eyes on her plate. The children froze mid-bite. I started to rise slowly, not wanting to make a scene, but Diana reached forward, impatient, her hand flat against my shoulder. "Mom," she hissed, "just move." And then she pushed. The chair legs scraped hard against the floor. I lost balance, landing against the rug with a sound that cut through the carols. My breath caught. For a moment, no one moved. The smell of rosemary and wine filled the silence. When I finally stood, my knees trembling, no one met my eyes. Diana turned back to the roast, her voice bright again. "Let's eat before it gets cold." I sat in another chair, one that no longer felt like mine, and stayed through the rest of dinner without tasting a single bite. By the time I left the house, the pie dish was empty, and so was something inside me. The night air carried that soft coastal dampness Savannah keeps even in December. I drove slowly, the wipers sweeping at a drizzle that wasn't really rain, just mist from the river. Christmas lights flickered across porches, tiny, perfect worlds where no one raised their voice, where no one pushed anyone out of a chair. The steering wheel felt warm beneath my palms. I kept both hands on it steady, the way I'd taught myself years ago after my husband died, and everything depended on me staying calm. Diana had been 12 then, gangly and silent, sitting at the kitchen table pretending not to cry while I filled out insurance forms. I'd promised her we'd be fine. Somehow we were. Tonight, that promise felt like an old photograph, beautiful, but belonging to another life. A car behind me honked when I hesitated at a light. I lifted one hand in apology and moved forward. The streets were nearly empty, the Spanish moss swaying above like gray ribbons in the dark. Each turn took me farther from her house, from the sound of clinking silverware and forced laughter. At a stoplight near Forsyth Park, I saw our reflection in a shop window, a tired woman alone in a silver sedan, face pale in the dashboard glow. For a second, I didn't recognize her. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat, one message, then another. I didn't need to read them. I knew they wouldn't be from Diana. Probably polite condolences from guests who'd seen everything, but said nothing. By the time I reached home, the mist had thickened into fog. I parked under the live oak in front of my porch and sat for a long time listening to the hum of the engine. Then I turned it off. The silence filled the car like water. Inside the house, the air was still and faintly sweet from the pine wreath I'd hung last week. I slipped off my coat, folded it neatly over the chair, and caught my reflection in the hall mirror. My lipstick had worn away, a faint bruise coloring the spot on my arm where Diana's hand had pressed. For a long moment, I just stared. The woman in the mirror looked older than she had that morning, not from the years, but from the weight of something that couldn't be undone. I turned on the lamp in the study and sat at the desk my husband once used for school records and bills. The mahogany surface still bore faint ink scratches from his handwriting. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a worn leather file folder marked Pierce Family Trust. Inside were papers I hadn't touched in years, deeds, bank statements, copies of the education fund we'd started for Diana, all in my name. I'd left it that way after he died because I believed in safety, in caution. Back then, I thought a mother's job was to give her child everything. I read each line slowly, my pen moving across certain names and authorizations. The trust's second signature, Diana's, was a privilege, not a right. My hand didn't tremble when I underlined that clause. On the desk sat a framed photo of us, Diana, at 21 in her college gown, smiling as I held the bouquet her father never got to see. I lifted it gently, wiped the dust from the glass, and set it face down. Outside, the fog thickened, pressing softly against the windows. I reached for the phone, its cord coiling like a pulse in my hand, and began writing down the numbers I would need to call by morning. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 11 as I laid the file open across the desk. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the heater and the slow tick of time. I'd made tea hours ago, but it had gone cold. It didn't matter. My mind was clear in a way it hadn't been for years. I found the business card tucked behind an old Christmas photo, Benjamin R. Bennett, attorney at law. He'd handled the estate after my husband died, a careful man with kind eyes who always spoke as if each word had to earn its place. I dialed his number, expecting voicemail, but he answered on the second ring. "Lorraine, everything all right?" His voice carried that gentle caution lawyers reserve for widows. "I'm sorry to call so late, Ben," I said. "I need you to prepare new documents in the morning. I want my daughter removed as trustee on the family account and education fund. Completely. No partial access, no delay." There was a pause, just the sound of paper shuffling on his end. "You're sure?" "Yes. And I'd like the house deed verified in my name only. It was never transferred." "All right," he said quietly. "I'll draft the revocation papers at 8. When we hung up, I stared at the phone for a moment before dialing another number, Cynthia Torres, my accountant of 20 years. She picked up, sounding half asleep. "Cynthia, it's Lorraine. I need all shared cards and linked accounts frozen by morning. If there's any attempt to access funds, alert me directly." Her voice softened. "I understand. Are you safe?" "I'm fine," I said. And I was. More than I'd been in a long time. After the calls, I sat back and listened to the house breathe. Somewhere outside, a train horn echoed over the river, long and low. I gathered the folders into a neat stack, placed them by the door for morning, and turned off the lamp. The darkness felt steady, deliberate, like the kind of silence that finally means something. By morning, the fog had lifted. The house smelled of coffee and lemon polish, the kind of quiet scent that used to mean safety. I moved through each room with a sense of calm purpose, almost ritual. The papers Benjamin had drafted were already signed and sealed. Cynthia had confirmed the freezes at dawn, short, efficient messages. Nothing sentimental. At 8:30, sunlight slipped through the lace curtains, painting soft patterns across the floor. I poured a cup of coffee, sat by the kitchen window, and waited. Not for guilt, not for anger, just for the day to begin. It didn't take long. By 9, my phone started vibrating on the counter. First, an unknown number, then Diana's name, then another and another. I let them ring until the sound became part of the background, like the hum of the refrigerator. I turned on the radio holiday music still playing across Savannah and let it drown out the noise. Between the songs came the sharp buzz of text alerts. Mom, call me. Something's wrong with the account. Grant says the bank called. Why did you do this? I didn't reply. By noon, there were 17 missed calls. By 2:31, by 4:47. The world outside continued, as if nothing had shifted. Children rode their bikes past the garden. A neighbor waved, unaware that something irreversible had already taken place. Cynthia called again to confirm the final steps. The trust access is revoked. She'll be notified through official channels. Her tone was professional, but under it, I heard something like quiet respect. Thank you, I said. And Cynthia, don't take any further calls from my daughter or her husband. They'll calm down eventually. After hanging up, I stepped out to the porch. The late afternoon air was cool, sweet with jasmine from the neighbor's fence. I could almost hear the echo of Diana's laughter from years ago, the child who once brought me seashells after school, who said she wanted to grow up to be brave like me. My phone buzzed again inside the house, insistent and angry. I didn't move to get it. Instead, I leaned against the porch railing and watched the street turn gold in the fading light. Somewhere downtown, church bells began to ring. I closed my eyes and let their steady rhythm carry me unbothered into the evening. By the end of the week, Savannah's small circles had already begun to talk. News always traveled quickly in this city, quietly, but thoroughly, like humidity creeping through old walls. A neighbor of Diana's who'd once shared holiday recipes with me called to say she'd heard about some misunderstanding. I thanked her and changed the subject. In the local business section, Grant's company name appeared beneath the kind of headline polite people called unfortunate. Their development project, the one financed through his firm, was suspended pending review. Without my guarantee, the bank had pulled its final approval. He'd built his career on appearances, the tailored suits, the charity events, the illusion of stability. Now those appearances were cracking. I didn't gloat. I simply made tea and turned the page. Cynthia emailed to confirm everything was final. No accounts linked, no withdrawals possible without my written consent. Her note ended with a single line. Take care of yourself, Lorraine. I read it twice before closing the laptop. That afternoon, I took a short walk by the river. Spanish moss hung low, brushing the water, the air damp with the promise of rain. Children played near the benches, their laughter echoing through the trees. I wondered if Diana's children were outside too, or if they were inside that grand, silent house watching their parents argue in whispers. When I returned home, the answering machine light blinked. Most messages were from numbers I didn't know, but one stood out, a soft, uncertain voice. Grandma. It's Ethan. Mom was crying today. She said something about money and the bank. Did you do something bad? The question hung in the still air long after the recording ended. I pressed the button again, listening to his small voice repeat the words, fragile and confused. Then I turned off the machine and stood by the window, the evening light pale against the glass. The following Monday, I drove across town to the Literacy Center on Abercorn Street. I'd volunteered there years ago before Diana's marriage, when my days still felt full of other people's beginnings. The building smelled faintly of chalk and coffee, the kind of scent that always reminded me of school mornings. The director, a thin woman with silver glasses, greeted me with a warm surprise. It's been too long, Lorraine. We could use you again. She led me to a small classroom where 5 young women sat at folding desks, their notebooks open, pencils chewed at the ends. Most were mothers, some barely out of their teens. One of them, a quiet girl named Tasha, looked up and smiled shyly. Her baby slept in a stroller beside her chair. We began with simple reading exercises. I listened to their halting voices as they shaped words, their effort trembling but determined. Tasha stumbled over a sentence and blushed. Sorry, she murmured. I shook my head. Never say sorry for learning. You just keep going. Her smile widened, small but real. As the hour passed, I felt something loosen in me, a weight that had sat too long in silence. Their energy filled the room raw and honest, unguarded by pride. I saw a reflection of my younger self in them, a woman building something out of nothing, quietly refusing to give up. When class ended, the girls thanked me. I left with ink on my fingers and something like peace settling behind my ribs. It was a gray morning when the knock came. I'd just finished watering the plants by the porch when I saw her through the window, Diana standing at the bottom of the steps, coat unbuttoned, hair unbrushed. She looked smaller somehow, as if the weeks had folded her in on herself. I opened the door, but didn't step aside. "Mom," she began, her voice uneven. "I know you're angry." "I didn't mean for things to get so bad." I said nothing, only waited. She took a breath, eyes wet. "It was just a moment of stress. You know how the holidays get, and with Grant's business and stop." My tone wasn't harsh, just firm enough to still her. "A moment doesn't push someone to the floor, Diana. Moments reveal who we are." Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked away toward the magnolia tree, the same one that used to drop petals she'd collect as a child. "I didn't think you'd really cut me off," she whispered. "I didn't cut you off," I said. "You walked away when you decided respect was optional." She wiped her face with the back of her hand, nodding as if she half understood. "Grant blames me. He says I ruined everything." I wanted to comfort her, but the truth sat heavy between us, unmoving. "Then maybe it's time you learn what everything really means." We stood there for a long moment, the wind carrying the faint sound of bells from downtown. She finally stepped back, her shoulders trembling. "I'll call you," she said softly. "Do what you need to." I answered. When she turned down the walkway, her footsteps sounded hollow against the bricks, fading into the quiet street until only the wind remained. 2 days after Diana's visit, the mail arrived later than usual. I wasn't expecting anything important, mostly holiday cards from neighbors, small reminders that the world kept spinning. But among the envelopes sat one addressed in careful, uneven handwriting. The return name made me stop, Ethan Reeves. I carried it to the porch and sat on the swing before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, lined from a school notebook. The first line read, "I miss you, Grandma. Mom says things are hard right now, but I hope you're not mad at us. I just want to come over again." The words were simple, but they hit with the quiet force of truth. I read them twice, then folded the page neatly, pressing it flat against my chest. For the first time in weeks, the ache inside me loosened just enough to let breath move freely. Evening had begun to fall, the sky deepening to that soft indigo between sunset and dark. I rose, crossed the porch, and reached for the switch near the door. The old porch light flickered once, then glowed steady, a pale golden circle spilling across the steps. My husband had wired it decades ago, back when every small act of care was a promise of tomorrow. I left the letter on the small table beside the swing, its edge curling in the breeze. The neighborhood was quiet now. Only the low hum of cicadas filled the air. Standing there with the warm light against the cold December night, I felt something shift, a kind of stillness that asked for nothing, explained nothing, only existed. I went back inside and let the door close softly behind me. The last Sunday of December was cold and clear, the kind of winter day Savannah rarely gets. I left the house just after sunrise, locking the door behind me, the porch light still glowing faintly in the morning haze. The city was quiet, its streets washed clean by last night's rain. I walked toward the river, following the familiar brick path along Bay Street. The air smelled of salt and damp stone, the breeze carrying the distant clang of a ship's bell. Across the water, sunlight caught the tops of the warehouses and turned them gold. I'd walked this route countless times with my husband years ago, our hands brushing as we talked about nothing and everything. Today, I walked alone, but not lonely. There was a difference I could finally feel. At the railing, I stopped and looked out across the slow shining water. Somewhere behind me, the bells of St. John's Cathedral began to ring soft. At first, then fuller, filling the air with sound that seemed to reach both heaven and the river below. I thought of Diana and the children, of the weight that love sometimes carries when it refuses to bend. Then quietly, I spoke into the wind. May you learn what love looks like when it stands its ground. The words drifted out over the water and disappeared into the morning light. A group of tourists passed laughing softly, their footsteps fading down the promenade. I stayed a moment longer, breathing in the cold, steady air before turning back toward home. The porch light would be off by now, but its glow lingered somewhere inside me, steady, warm, and unafraid.